Okay. Good morning to everyone. So it's quite a joy for me to be a part of the IT Pro Dev Connections conference for 2020. It's really nice being one of the first presentations of the day, and hopefully this is going to be something interesting for you and you find usefulness out of it. The presentation is going to be in English, as noted into the tag for the session itself. We do have a fair amount of people that don't understand Greek, so although I could deliver it in Greek, I thought it might have been better to do the English version, to be honest. My name is Ioannis Stavrinides. I work for Microsoft as a data and AI cloud solution architect. My area of concern is Central and Eastern Europe, and I work in the partner organization, so I don't directly work with any customers of Microsoft, but I rather help Microsoft partners develop solutions that are focused on our data and AI stack on Azure, so that they can deliver those as solutions to their own customers. The session today is actually not PowerPoint heavy at all. I literally have just 2 PowerPoint slides, so this is one of them. So the title, my contact details, and so on. And the other one is the very good sponsors that the event has. So I just wanted to showcase this also for everyone else, because if it wasn't for all of these sponsors, this event would probably not happen or be as well orchestrated for everyone. So please go over to their booths, share with them your thoughts, and talk with them. It's really valuable from the conference side that we have some interaction with them. And with that, that's done with PowerPoint. So let me switch to what I'm actually going to be showing. So Azure Challenge. What is it? So essentially, just to give you kind of the backstory and help with the at least understanding why this exists to begin with. So a couple of years ago, about a year after I started in my current role in Microsoft, I saw the need for a way to have a structured learning approach for Azure services. And what do I mean structured learning? I don't mean going to a classroom and having someone delivering sessions to you and taking you through hands-on labs and so on. I was kind of I based the idea on a couple of other types of events that I had the chance to join, which are called capture the flag events. These are kind of security oriented, but essentially the idea of those events is you need to go through different steps along the journey of capturing some flags. So you need to do some things, and you cannot proceed if you haven't completed the previous one. And I thought, why not create an Azure Learning Challenge platform where you need to go and create some things, but the platform is telling you, okay, do this. It checks if you did it. Then you proceed to the next one. It checks that, and so on. And at some point, you end up, finishing the challenge, etc. But essentially, the platform itself is highly hands-on. So you need to do things. Whereas with Microsoft Learn, for example, there's a lot of theory. There's a lot of just multiple choice questions, clicking next, or even when you need to do something practical, there's a lot of copy paste that happens and no real thought process that you need to put into some things. So I needed a bigger challenge. So this is why I came up with this. So this is essentially an MVC, an ASP.NET Core MVC application, completely open source. So it's an MIT license. Anybody can take it, do whatever they want with it. Happy to accept any contributions from anyone in the community, either code-wise or content-wise, and I'm going to go into some of those things. But I just want to kind of give you a round up of the GitHub repo itself. So this is the URL. So github.com/istavrinidis/Azure Challenge takes you here. In the README, you can actually find a decent amount of documentation on how you use it, essentially. So how do you create the questions? How do you create the challenges? How do you administer various things? One of the things that's missing, and I will be adding it hopefully during Christmas vacation, is kind of a video on going through everything through the platform. So similar on what we will be doing today, but in a bit more detail. So you can find all of the documentation and everything that's pertinent to setting up things within the environment itself. And to make things a bit easier for everyone, you can actually go and deploy the whole solution into your own Azure subscription, essentially. And this is kind of the recommended approach if you want to publish this and have people use it. I do have an environment that I have deployed on the internal Microsoft subscription that we use, but due to the fact that the primary authentication mechanism is Azure AD, I would need to go through a bunch of legal hoops from the Microsoft side to enable this for external users. So I decided, okay, I'm just going to keep it for the Microsoft.com alias accounts, and everything else, you either need to deploy it locally to test and play around with it, or deploy it on Azure. Now, the good thing is you just click a button. So I have everything in Azure Resource Manager template. So it goes on and deploys the base infrastructure, including the web application and everything else that it needs to run. But there are some post-deployment steps that you need to do. So essentially, you need to deploy a SendGrid account. I could have done this with Resource Manager templates, but if you've never deployed anything from the Azure Marketplace, the ARM template deployment fails. So you need to have at some point in time deployed something from the marketplace. So in order for me to kind of make sure that that doesn't happen, this is kind of a manual step, which is fine. It's nothing really that easy, and I have a link to the documentation on exactly what you need to do. Then you need to get the API key and set it into an Azure Web Apps app setting. You can also reference that through Azure Key Vault as a best practice from the security aspect. And then you need to set up authentication. Now, there's 3 built-in authentication capabilities already set up. So you can either use Azure AD. So Azure AD as in, multi-tenant option, or even personal Microsoft accounts. So for you to enable, Outlook.com and Microsoft.com, Outlook.com, Hotmail, Live.com, and so on. Or you can just do straight up Azure AD, so multi-tenant organizational identities, so that, potentially you can use it internally within your company and so on if you have Azure AD. Or if you want to use other social identity platforms, I also have the ability to do Facebook authentication and Google authentication. And these are just the ones that are pre-baked into the solution. They're configuration driven. Just enable them, add the secrets and the client IDs, and you're good to go. And they just work out of the box. If you need to add anything else, of course, you can go and retrofit that into the code itself, either by forking the project or even contributing back to the project itself. So that's the deployability aspect. Now, the nice thing about this, every service that I'm using, so you can see a list of the services here, except from Azure SignalR, essentially, everything can be on-prem. Of course, Azure Key Vault, if you run it through Visual Studio, you can use user secrets. I've got a SQL Server instance running on my PC. Web App is IIS, essentially. Okay, App Insights, again, that's a cloud-based solution. And with Azure Cosmos DB, for those that are not aware, we actually have an Azure Cosmos DB emulator that you can use for local Cosmos DB deployment. So essentially, you can run the whole thing on your PC without incurring any cost, essentially, from the Azure perspective. Because, let's be honest, Azure App Insights, it's free for a decent amount of traffic, and especially for development, no issues there. SignalR service, you can actually get out of it, like not even use it. I only use it for a specific use case. So for challenge analytics, I'm going to show you that. But you don't need to have it for development purposes. So even if you don't deploy SignalR, you're going to get some JavaScript errors, but that's it. Okay, so let's kind of have a look at what does all of this mean. So after you deploy the service itself, you're going to see a bunch of things in your subscription. So let me actually open my Azure subscription over here. Kind of show you the things that you need to be aware of, essentially. So let me go to my resource group. It's in this one. And there's just a couple of things that I want to point out. So first of all, in the app service itself, just for those that might not know about all of these things. So if you go to configuration, you actually get access to all of the app config, essentially, aspects of any especially ASP.NET Core applications. So those that are aware of, the old web.config from, still exists, but now it's more or less, app.json, app settings.json, and so on. But you can expose all of those through here. So you add all of these. In my case, these actually get added from the ARM template deployment. So you get all of these. You don't need to add them manually. But the thing that I wanted to show essentially is this thing over here. So key vault reference. So you can change all of these and set these as, static variables, static values essentially. But you can also use the deployed Azure key vault to do a key vault reference for the secrets themselves. This is always a best practice. I am a cloud solution architect for Microsoft, so I need to go based on our best practices. So I would encourage you to do exactly the same. But everything essentially is over here. So if you want to enable Facebook authentication, essentially, now it's false. You just turn this to true, register a Facebook app, get the app ID, get the app secret, set these here, and when you go and log in, you will find an option to do Facebook authentication, and that's it, essentially. There's a couple of other things. Everything is documented in the GitHub repo, so I don't want to take much more time over here, but just to show you what you get out of a deployment. So the SendGrid account that you create, an app service plan with an app service deployed into it, application insights, SignalR, an Azure Cosmos DB account, and a SQL database, an Azure SQL database. Now, all of these, if you kind of run them without, expecting thousands of users to connect to it, 400 RUs for Cosmos DB, more than enough. An S1 SQL server, SQL database, more than enough. SignalR, you kind of need to go to the standard tier for it, just because of the connections that open. But again, that's a pretty cheap, let's say, deployment. And of course, I mean, you can always just delete them and deploy them when you need, because all of the data that you put into the application from a content side is actually exportable and importable. And I'll explain how you can do all of those things. Okay, so let's move to the actual challenge. So let me kind of log out. So this is what you see when you come over here. So if I do a login, here I can only sign with the Microsoft tenant. This is my deployment, and even the local environment that I'm running, it's connected to that. And essentially you see, okay, what do I have over here? So no available challenges, no unfinished challenges, but because I was the first user to sign in, I actually get administrative rights. So I can see all of this manage side over here. So if I go to manage on the challenges side, you see I actually have one. So it's called AZ900. So if I have a look at this, basically a bunch of questions and so on. Now, I'm going to go through all of this at some point, but the basic premise of Azure Challenge is I have a bunch of question templates, which I hydrate in a challenge itself, and then I publish the challenge for people to look at. So if I go over to the question templates right now, I have two types of questions that I can add. So I can add a multiple choice question, which is essentially, a bunch of options that you denote which one is correct or not. Or I can add an API-based question, and this is the more interesting one. So let's look at the multiple choice question. So, you need to add some basic stuff. So name, description, targeted Azure service. This is more for grouping the questions between them. Difficulty. This is something that, there's still work to be done on this, on what will this be used for. But essentially you can think of it as a grading system. So easy, medium, hard, or expert when it comes to the difficulty of the question itself. And when you correctly answer the question, you essentially get 100, 200, 300, or 400 points, which are visible over here. So that's where the difficulty comes in. And the question, now this is, again, an interesting thing, and I'm going to show an example of this. So let's look at this one. So if you see, there's a bunch of text, but there's this over here. So stuff in curly brackets. Now, what are these? These, in the context of the application, are called placeholders. So I have the notion of question templates because I want questions to be reusable, but you can have different parameters into them. So essentially, these placeholders allow you to parameterize questions across challenges, or even, someone can do the same challenge, but because the parameters are different, it's actually going to be a different challenge itself. So the questions as kind of the end result going to be the same, but not specifically the parameters or the things that they need to put into it. Now, there's three types of parameters. There's global, so anything that has a global dot, some name, inside the curly braces. Those are global for the challenge. So what does this mean? The first time I set a value to global.primaryvnet, every subsequent question I add to a challenge that has this global parameter gets exactly the same value. So especially when you want to reuse things, like, for example, everything needs to be in the same resource group. So this is where this comes in. So global.resource group name. So I don't want to type the same thing over and over again, because I might get typos, I might forget what it is, and so on. So I can reuse everything over and over again. The other thing that you can use is local parameters. So these are scoped to the hydrated question itself. So when I go and add the question to the challenge, I can give a value to this parameter. But if I add the question again in the same challenge or in a different challenge, the value is different. Okay, so this is simply something that I'm going to use in the scope of this question when I hydrate it. So that's how you set up the question itself. And I'm going to show you an example of what does it look like hydrated. There's also another parameter type. Let me find one of those. Yeah, this one will work. So if you see, it's the profile parameter. So what does the profile do? It essentially gives access to the context of the question to profile variables. So when you think about Azure services, something like a virtual machine, okay, or a storage account, which actually storage account is a much better example, and this is what I actually have here. Those need to have unique DNS names. So there was a challenge on, how do I give a user consistent random names? And the consistency was the trick there. Like, how do I do it consistently that every time that I ask them to build a storage account, for example, I can have something that's always the same, but is unique to the user. So what I'm doing essentially is I'm just getting the username, hashing it, and just that. And then you concatenate it to something else. So that's going to be something random concatenated with the word store. So that thing is going to be unique to every user that's going to try to run the question itself. Additionally, you get things like subscription ID, tenant ID, and so on, which you do set into your profile, and I'm going to show you that in a while. So that's the question. A good idea is to put some justification. So when the user completes the question successfully, you kind of explain to them, okay, what did you just do? What's the usefulness of this? Where can you use this in a different way? Or why did we decide to tell you to do something in a specific way? So kind of a feedback message that you give to the user once they finish the question itself. A bunch of useful links. So they might not know how to complete the question. So this is kind of a link to reference documentation or a blog post or maybe a Microsoft Learn training session or, a YouTube video, whatever. So just links that can refer to a way that you can learn how to do it. And then this is where the API-based questions come in. So this is an API-based question. You give the reference to what APIs the question is going to call to validate whether the user has done something or not. So all of these are REST APIs from the Azure perspective. So it's a GET request, management.azure.com in this case, and it goes and gets, the primary VM name from the virtual machines API. And this one is to do network interfaces, for example. Okay. And you can add as many of these REST endpoints as you want. So there's no real limit to it. And there's another instance, and I've seen this happen in various Cosmos DB APIs, where you actually need contributor access to the resource. So by default, the access that we ask for the application to kind of go and search in your Azure subscription is reader only. In some cases, it requires contributor. So there's this flag over here to kind of tell the user that, okay, for us to validate this, unfortunately, we need contributor because that's what the API wants. But, it rarely happens. I just have this because I've seen it. In some cases, it might be necessary to have that. And just to show you what what multiple choice questions look like, which are much, much simpler. You essentially just have, the question, again, parameterized, any justification, again, that you show after that, and any useful links. So you don't have any REST APIs to call. So this is how you create the questions themselves. So now, once I have the questions, I can go and create a challenge and hydrate the questions in the challenge. Now, once I create a challenge, I'm going to show you another one actually now. You can actually export these. So this packages everything that's in the Cosmos DB. So that's the backend that we use. So a bunch of JSON files in a zip format that you can download it. Now, in the repo itself, there's actually an exports folder that has 2 of those zip files to start with. Okay, so anybody can create a challenge and push one of these zip files into the exports folder. And if it's something that's useful, we will, of course, merge the pull request into the repo so that's available for everyone. And then you can just click import, and this goes and reads actually that location into the GitHub repo itself, and you can import it. So I have the Cosmos DB Core API starter thing, so I can import it, and there we go. There we go. We have that. Now, of course, you can add a new one, and you can give it a name, a description. What's the service category? So what is this all about? So is it, about Cosmos? Is it VMs? What is it? There's a duration. So if you leave it blank or 0, there's no time limit. But you can actually say that, okay, you need to finish up this challenge in 1 hour. That's it. Any welcome messages that you want to give, and any links to prerequisites. So what would the user need to kind of look for from a content perspective before they start the whole thing? So this could be actually a Git repo with a bunch of links that they need to go, because it's an advanced challenge. So you need to go through kind of the level 100 or 200 things before starting the challenge itself. So if I kind of go here and look at what does a hydrated question look like? Okay. So let me go into edit mode over here. Actually, it's going to be a bit more difficult. So this is hydrated already. So I have all of these in my question itself. So this would essentially be text boxes. So if I try and add this one, sorry, didn't select it. So add. You're going to see text boxes. Okay. Now, anything that's global dot and doesn't already have a value, we need to give it. But anything that within the context of the challenge already has value, like the primary VNet already has one, we don't need to put it. It gets automatically populated. So you need to give it everything. So you see that we have 10 required empty fields. In the URI parameters, we also have, the NSG name, for example, because this is about creating a network security group. And as you can see, once you start adding the values over here, so if I do NSG name test, you're going to see that changes. So this gives you a preview of the actual question. Now, in the answer side, and for that, let me actually go to this one, because it's going to be a bit easier to understand. This is where you actually, so for every URI, there's an associated response, let's say, that I can check against. Now, Azure REST APIs are JSON based. So I essentially created a JSON parser that is able to, you're able to give a path to what you want to check so that you can go and check what it needs. Now, as you can see in this case, because I've got 2 URIs, I have 2 things that I can check. Now, if you don't add a parameter, essentially the answer, let's say, is correct if we get an HTTP 200 back. So, no errors, essentially. But you can add parameters. So if I go to this URI over here, actually this one is one of those that it's not a really good one, but let me show this one. This one is actually a really, really good option to look at. So this is all about, virtual networks. So essentially, it's this API over here. So if you go to the Azure REST API documentation, you can get all of the definitions of the REST APIs. But one really, really nice thing is that you can try it. And this is really important to kind of use it during the context of building a question or a challenge. Okay, so I have here, this is my resource group name, my test resource group, virtual network name. So let me see, so I think it's test VNet, yeah. So test VNet. And you essentially don't need to give it anything else, at least in this occasion. So if I click run, 404, not found, my test resource group. Yeah, wrong. So let me do this, because that is a wrongly authenticated window. So this should be with my actual identity for that subscription. It always helps if you're pushing APIs towards the correct subscription. So let me try. Okay, sign out, and let's try again. This one. And hopefully, if I can't do this in like another 2 minutes, you just have to take my word for it. Let's try this again. Sign in. Okay, okay, so I need to sign out from the other one. Now, sorry, this is where the problem of having too many accounts. So try it again, sign in, give it the correct account, no thanks. So I'm in the wrong, okay. So, yeah, this is weird. Okay, so what would you get back? Okay, so essentially I would get back a live view of something like, I think there's an example. Yeah, something like this. Okay, so let me exit focus mode. So this is what you get back as a response. Now, why is this important? Because this is how you're going to define how the answer looks like. So if I go over here, you're going to see, okay, I need location to be West Europe, because that's what I'm asking them. Deploy a virtual network in West Europe. So in the root of the document, I've got a property called location, and this is West US in the example. But if I deploy it correctly, it's going to be West Europe. So that should be okay. If it's not okay, it's going to give an error message, location is incorrect. Now, I also want to check, the prefix for the subnet itself, if it's this one. So if you look at what's going on here, if I go to properties, address space, address prefixes, so properties dot address space dot address prefixes, it's this one. Okay, now in my case, I want it to be this, but that's fine. Now the tricky part is when you have subnets. So I want in here if you look at this one, I want to test subnet with this address space and a Cosmos subnet with this address space. But even in the example, you're going to see that subnets is an array. So I might have different subnets, which is the case in my case. So how do I traverse this JSON document? So I'm checking the correct IP address space for the correct subnet, for example. So this is where something like this comes in. And let me open this. Let me open it in Notepad. So what I'm doing is I'm telling it, okay, go to properties.subnets, and the array, get the path from the array itself where the name property is Cosmos subnet. So if I look at this over here again, so in subnets, it's an array, check all the name in every instance within the array. The one that's Cosmos subnet, go get the properties and the address prefix. So it finds the instance essentially, and then it gets the properties, address prefix, and checks it. So that's how you kind of navigate when you have arrays. So this is quite important. It's actually documented anyway over here. So I've got an example and everything that you can use to kind of look into that. So that's it essentially. So we set up the question, and now we can actually do a couple of things also here. So I can check some things. So let's see, I can check, did I create a correct resource group? Did I create the Cosmos DB account correctly, for example? And it gives you success over here, or it gives you the error message on the check that it actually did. Okay, so once this is done, we can essentially either publish. So clicking this on, you publish it and you kind of freeze the challenge now, or you can give a private code. Now, where is this important? So if I go over here, you can see I've got a join private challenge. So I can come here, I can give that code. So if you don't want to publish a challenge for any reason, and you kind of want to keep it on the lowdown, you can give them that code and they can join it. Now, last part of the demo. So let me show you, there's no challenges now. So I can go over here, AZ900, turn it on, save. Now if I go back here, you're going to see, oh, I've got one. So now I can see, okay, I have this, I can start it, and it kind of starts the flow. Now I'm not going to go through this one, because this is the one that you're going to be asked to kind of do as participants. So I'm actually going to do the other one. But before I go there, let me open up over here. So this is the actual website that you will be using. Okay, so if I sign it with my Microsoft account over here, which I have enabled, I'll get again, the challenges. But before that, this is what you're going to see. So because we're reaching back into your subscription, okay, so you might have been wondering for some time now, how does he do that? Well, it's kind of easy, essentially. We use service principals. So you need to go to your Azure portal. Let me kind of go over here into your Azure Active Directory account. There's actually documentation over here. So if you see, there's a link to a document where you can go and look up and see exactly step by step how this should be done. But just to kind of show you, in your directory, you have app registrations. You create a new registration. You give it a name. This doesn't really matter, in all honesty. And once you give it a name, so if I go to the one that I'm using, for example, you need to go and create a secret. This is not the one that I'm actually using, but you create a secret, and you need to provide a couple of points of information. Okay, so if I actually go and do this, so you click here to configure. So you need to give it the subscription ID. So you can find that from so this is the client ID. Okay, so let me client ID. You need the secret. So I actually have mine saved over here, and I'm going to not show something. So Azure, yep, over here. So this is actually a secret value. You can't see it, which is fine. And let me also get the other components. But to get those, you can, so the tenant ID is actually this one over here. So the directory ID itself. We kind of, yep. So this is the directory ID. So if I come over here, I can put this here. So tenant ID, and the subscription ID, you can get it from any, from a bunch of places. A good one being, any resource essentially. But if I go back to my tenant over here and look at properties, oh no, sorry, not the overview. I think it's somewhere here. Yeah. So no, tenant ID. Sorry, tenant ID again. Okay, so if you go to a resource group or anywhere else, or even your subscriptions path, you'll find this over here, subscription ID. So this is what you're looking for. So there's a lot of ways to find it. So once you set all of that up and you click save, error. Okay. Yeah, I'm in a different subscription. Okay, so that's kind of the problem there. So my username here. So in this case, it didn't work, but in your case, it will. Now, yeah, because I use the client ID that I don't have the secret for. So let me actually really do the correct demo. So let me go and put these back again. Client ID, let me get the correct one now. I do apologize for that. Live demos are always tricky. So now everything should be okay. Yes, okay. Profile has been updated. You can see that I get my subscription name. Now, the service principal needs to be a reader somewhere. Okay, so a resource group, subscription itself. So the identity that I create, and this is kind of important. So let me show what exactly do I mean by this. So if I go back to my Azure AD again, app registrations. So let's take this one. I think this is the one that I used. So this is the name of the thingy over here, but I get roles and administrators. Okay, actually, no. So I need my subscription. So I can either come to my subscription over here, go to access control, role assignments. I don't know if I have it on the subscription level. I might not, don't remember. Okay, so it's on the resource group name, but you can also put it here. So if I do add role assignment, so reader, okay, unless you need contributor for some reason, so there you can actually give contributor for that specific service, but in general, give it reader. So if I do AZ challenge, something like that, I think, yeah, you can see it here. So save, and now it has a reader. If you don't give the application identity, so the service principal, any role assignment, this is going to fail. Okay, so it's going to show you an error message. You won't get the subscription name back, and so on. But now that I have this set up, so let me actually go back to my demo environment over here. Let me actually go and do this. So I will enable this one because I don't want to give you the ability to see the answers for the AZ900 part. So let me do the Cosmos DB starter. So this kind of wants me, okay, create a resource group with the name My Test Resource Group in West Europe. So if I go back over here just to show you that, I'm not lying and it actually exists. So this is a My Test resource group, and it's in West Europe. So chances are if I do check, it's going to say all good. Yep, successfully completed, shows us the justification, and I can go to the next question. So now it asks us, create a new Cosmos DB account. This is the hash value that I was mentioning before. Okay, as you see, I already created one because this takes about 10 to 15 minutes. So it says, West Europe, enable the free tier discount if it's available, enable non-production, disable geo-redundancy. So it gives you a bunch of options that it actually checks if you've done it or not. So again, I click check, and this happens. Now, add a database. Now, this requires the service principal to have contributor access. Okay, now mine already has. But it says, add a new database. So if I do a check now, because I don't have one, it's probably going to fail. And it's going to say, okay, authorization step. So this, I think, has to do with actually the access control side of things. So if I do role assignments, reader, yeah, so this is the problem. So add role assignment. So if I do contributor here, I can do it on the resource group anyway. This is the one that I'm using. Okay. So I'm adding that, and this should be okay now, and it's going to give us a different error that I don't have a database, probably. If I remember correctly, that should be okay now. So now if I go and hopefully add a database into my Cosmos DB account, this will work. And it did work yesterday, but unfortunately, I did a bunch of changes. I should have done Data Explorer because it's Cosmos. Come up. So new container. Actually, I don't want a new container. I want a new database, and I want that database called My First Database. And the database should not have provision throughput enabled. So over here, so I uncheck this because it said it doesn't want that. I click OK. So it's going to create a database. This is fairly quick to do. So I've got the database now, and hopefully when I do check, this works. Let's see. Yeah, okay, that's fine. So as you saw, it was failing before. Now it doesn't. So chances are I actually did something that is not, completely false. So check. Why didn't it move? Should have moved. Okay, yeah. So I had a container. I thought it didn't move. But yeah, you get the idea. And because we're 5 minutes from the end of the presentation, just to show a couple of things. So when you're actually running, let's say something, I do actually have in the challenges side, I've got analytics. So if I have a look at this, this is what actually uses the signaler part of the experience, let's say. And this essentially gives you the ability to look at what's going on. So how many users essentially have started, green if they have finished it, how many users are in each question or completed actually each question. So you can kind of put this on a big screen and kind of have a friendly competition going. Hopefully when we get back to, non-social distancing aspects, and we're able to be, a bunch of people in one big room, you can have that on the screen, or, if you're doing remote, you can actually screen share this screen and kind of, again, get some friendly competition coming up. Now, because I was very cognizant of things like GDPR and stuff like that, I didn't actually put any names of users over here. But again, for your purposes, you can do whatever you want with it. You can change that in your own UI and so on. And the last thing I wanted to show is role management. Now, I'm the only user here, and just to make sure that you don't screw up your own account, you can't change the role of your account. Someone else can change it for you, but you cannot change your own, because if you're the only administrator and you make yourself a user, then essentially you would need to go into the database to change it, which is a pain. So there's more users over here. You're going to see 3 buttons. So make user, make contributor, or content editor, or make administrator. Now, administrators can manage user roles. That's kind of the difference between administrators and content editors. So both can do exactly the same, apart from looking at this page, essentially. So if you want to create challenges, question templates, and so on, you kind of need to be at least a content editor. If you're a user, you can only participate in challenges. So you can only see this menu item. You can't see this one. And let me kind of look at everything over here. Yeah, I'm more or less done. Any questions from anyone? Can't see anything in the chat itself. You can use that if you want. I know there's a slight delay, in all honesty, so I'll wait a while. And while I wait for any questions that might come up, again, kind of reiterating a couple of things. This is the GitHub repo, so you can go and find it here. You can fork it. You can contribute to it. Content is needed, and I'm kind of relying on the community to help with that, because I have a day job, I have a family, I have a lot of things to run about, and I can't do a single challenge for every Azure service on my own. So I definitely need help from the community. I will be adding to them, of course, personally also, but I would appreciate any help with it. Any feedback you have or any bugs that you find, please, open issues, push-pull requests, happy to get contributors into it. Now, just to kind of note a couple of use cases for this. So definitely kind of training, remote or in place training, like everybody in a single room. But one of the things that actually one of the partners that I'm working with kind of told me is, our HR department can use this to vet people for specific positions. So if you're looking for a junior Azure engineer, for example, and you want as a minimum bar of entry, they know what AZ900 is all about. You can just tell them, okay, here's the page, log in, get AZ900, pass it. And in the backend, I do actually have like timings and everything. So you can see how long it took for them to kind of do it. So, if someone that says they know AZ900 stuff and it takes them a month to do, I'm not one to judge, but, should you hire him? So it's a way for you to actually vet with practical knowledge, okay? Because this is very practical. You need to do stuff on an Azure subscription. But there's a multitude of other use cases that you can use this. Like some of our partners are actually using it to train their own customers, for example, in some aspects like AZ900 or so keep in mind, everything is open. You can use it selfishly or you can use it from a community side of view. The only thing that's currently not available, and I purposefully did not put that because I want to kind of push people to contribute back, is to import challenges. Everything actually needs to be in the Git repo. But code is available, so you can figure out a way to kind of import your own zip files without going through the Git repo on your own, or even change the URI that I'm searching for from the zip files themselves. And with that, I still don't see any questions, which is okay. I mean, that's fine. Okay, yeah, I actually see one that was quite early on. Any plans for hosting a public instance under the umbrella of an educational institution in the future? So this is actually hosted under the community group itself. So the one that I was showing over here, so IT Pro Dev Challenge, this is actually going to remain. Okay, so it's going to be available. You can have a look at every time what's going on. You can ask for permissions to kind of be content contributors also if you want to. But if someone wants to host it as a service for anyone else and kind of even rebrand, it is MIT license. Okay, so you can do literally anything that you want to it. More than okay to do that. And with that, I'm a minute over. So thank you very much for your attention. Thanks everyone that joined, and I wish you a really, really great conference going forward. Anything you want from this, you can of course reach out to me. Let me kind of put my email back as the closing thoughts. So this is my email. Feel free, reach out, post the link, of course, for the GitHub repo. And let me do both. So this is the GitHub repo, and this is where you will find the published challenge. Okay. And I think that would be enough from a links perspective. Yep. So thank you again. Have a great conference.